Now, before we go any further, I do want to address the elephant in the room. I made some jokes during my last video, and some individuals may have found that a little bit off-putting. I was just trying to do it to add a little bit of levity to the lesson, but I certainly have gone back and looked at everything, and I want to ensure everybody knows that I do not think that things that happen within a church are a laughing matter.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
Did you know that Christians are a bunch of cannibals, atheists, and incestuous degenerates? That's what you might think if you were an individual who lived around the time of the early church. You have to keep in mind the people who lived around the time of the early church obviously didn't benefit from centuries upon centuries upon centuries of Christian societies normalizing some of the things that we don't really give a second thought. The idea of communion was something that very much sounded like cannibalism. The idea of not participating in all of the various feast days of the various cult deities that existed in the Greco-Roman world. That was something that would look to them very similar to how we might look at atheists in our world today. And the idea that we went around referring to each other as brother and sister in Christ, that we were all part of this common familiar root, was something that was very strange because it meant we might have individuals who are even maybe our spouses that we'd refer to as a brother or sister in Christ. And that sounded very incestuous. These were things that ironically a lot of people back in Roman times would actually use in order to denigrate the name and reputation of people who were rivals or people who were enemies. But yet when they looked at a lot of the Judeo-Christian rhetoric, it seemed to openly acknowledge these things. And so you end up having accounts of the early church that look a little something like this.
Now the story about the initiation of young novices is as much to be detested as it is well known. An infant covered over with meal, that it may deceive the unwary, is placed before him who is to be stained with their rites. This infant is slain by the young pupil, who has been urged on as if to harmless blows on the surface of the meal, with dark and secret wounds. Thirstily, oh horror! They lick up its blood, eagerly they divide its limbs. By this victim they are pledged together, with this consciousness of wickedness they are covenanted to mutual silence.
I don't know about you, but I haven't been to a church that looks like that. But yet, that's how other people looked in at the practices of these early Christians. And as we all know, it only takes a little bit of something not being understood in order for people to kind of create their own truth or make up their own rumors. The reason why I bring this up is because it can be easy for us to turn around and look at different religious practices and to say, that's weird, that's strange, or that's odd, but then we're blinded to the fact that people may look at us and see things we do as being strange, especially in the type of church that we're in. It's obviously something that is a bit non-traditional. As a part of that, even the outside world is inclined to look at us and to say, that's strange, it's odd, why would you do it that way? That can't be real Christianity. But then that begs the question, what are they basing their ideas of real Christianity on? Are they basing it on social norms and their expectation of what they've seen family members or maybe they've seen in popular media of churches in the past? Or are they basing it on some kind of theological truth? It's probably the former rather than being the latter. So that being said, it bears questioning. If we were to look at how we express our religion, how we express our faith, what do we base it on? Do we base it on the same type of social norms? Do we base it on our expectations of what might be convenient for us or what we might want? Or do we base it on something that's a little bit more meaningful? And when you look at our church, there's certainly things that people are inclined to look at and say are very odd. I mean, the idea that we don't centralize our worship experience and the idea that we don't kind of have a single worship tradition that we follow is something that certainly would cause a lot of people to cock an eyebrow and maybe look at us a little bit funny, as if we're doing something that maybe isn't scriptural. Maybe we're doing something that isn't truly Christian because it's not what they expect. The reality is that we hold up on a pedestal the idea of being a community. It's one of the reasons why we just got done doing an entire sermon series focusing on what it means to be a part of a church community. That is something that is incredibly scriptural, and it's something that you can see throughout the entire New Testament from Acts all the way through the end. And when you look at this idea of a community-oriented church, it drives you to do things a little bit different. The idea of service and giving in a community-based church is very different than it may be in maybe some other faith traditions. In some churches and in some faith traditions, I think things like giving and serving are treated very similarly to the way that we treat community charities or maybe community service organizations. We look at church as if it's something that we give to or something that we support if I have the spare time. It's something if I can make room on my calendar, then maybe I'll go help out with something, or maybe if something just kind of drops in my lap and it's obvious, then I'll go do it. But, it's charity. They should be happy with what they get. That's not how you look at things in a community-oriented church. And I say that up front because I want everybody to understand that in a church like this, where we hold this sense of community so dearly, it's something that really doesn't operate if individuals look at what we do in the same mold as what they see in many other churches. Other churches certainly can allow you to be able to just kind of walk in on Sunday and go do your thing and send your kids off to the little program, and they have all the paid staff to help out. But here, we operate more like a grouping of families that are worshiping together, much like what you see in the Bible. So you see, what may appear to be odd to some other believers is something that we look at and say, well, no, we're doing something because we are trying to follow the intent of what we see in the scriptures. It's something that we don't besmirch somebody else for worshiping in a different way. And hey, if somebody was a part of our church and said, no, you know what, I need that more programmatic thing, then God bless, I'll be the ambassador for you and help you out and be your advocate. But it is to say that for us, we have seen that this sense of community is something that is precious. It's something that you don't just get anywhere. And it's something that we think is innate to our experience in being united in Jesus Christ. One of the other things that we can see in this idea of being a community-centered church is this idea of flexibility. Something that is posted on the doors of our hub building is 1 Corinthians 9, verses 19 through 23. And what you see in here is Paul talking about the fact that he will become whatever he needs to become in order to reach people for Christ. That is strange to people because it means that rather than us having a single unified worship experience on Sundays where everybody's expected to come in and sit down in the same way and sing the same songs and all that, we look at our sense of being united and we base that on other things, our beliefs, on our sense of community. We don't so much base that on the fact that we're going to come in and do this one ritual once a week. And so it looks very odd to somebody who has only known that more traditional mold of Christianity. But once again, to us, there's a reason behind it. These are just two examples of how we do things that might look odd to the world around us, but yet have some kind of meaning to us and in some way help us to have a deeper, richer relationship with Jesus Christ. And so as you consider these things, and as you consider other ways that our church might look different, I would challenge you to ask yourself, what things might we look at other churches, and maybe at first glance we might judge what they do, but if we were to stop and actually see it from their perspective, we would see that those practices, while maybe strange and foreign to us, are actually things that are deeply meaningful and help those individuals get closer to their Creator. People love their sense of routine, and routine, especially when it's expressed over several generations, becomes deeply entrenched tradition. And there's nothing wrong with that. Traditions are a fantastic thing. I have said multiple times, I love the good, old, beautiful, liturgical religious practices. I think they're absolutely beautiful in how ornate they are and how they have tons of little tiny embedded details that are so meaningful in our experience of worship. However, I also recognize that a lot of people tend to start founding their faith in those traditions themselves, and they forget the thing those traditions are designed to reflect. And so in our church, we seek to do the exact same thing. We seek to try to do these things that might be different so that they can reach other people that maybe traditionally aren't necessarily reached or aren't necessarily accommodated for. We want to do these things, but we want to ensure that we don't fall into the exact same trap. In our church, it can be very easy to start doing things simply because it is different, or it can be easy to start doing things simply because it is convenient. And we have to remember that the purpose of church is not supposed to be the fact that you get a little vacation once a day. It's not supposed to be that, you have these little amenities that you get to tap into and you kind of hop around to, whatever church has the best amenities. The purpose of church is to build up one another. And in our church specifically, we seek to achieve that by holding this sense of community and these bonds with one another, where we want to support one another, where if we see somebody, stressed out, or we see somebody overburdened, or we see somebody where everything is being dumped on their shoulders, or they're just running into a hard time that they can't seem to get out of, we want to be a church that seeks to draw closer to our Creator by seeing those opportunities and then jumping up and saying, I want to be a part of the relief for you. I want to show compassion to you. I want to do whatever I can to show you the type of love and the type of grace that Christ showed me. In that way, we can seek to reflect Christ's nature, and we can seek to draw closer to Christ by attempting to imitate Him. So, as we continue to look at more of these weird Christian practices, I would challenge you to look at every single thing that we discuss, whether it's in somebody else's church or whether it's something that we do, and then to ask, what is this truly reflecting? Is it reflecting the traditions of man, or is it reflecting something far more divine? That's our lesson that we have for today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. Until we can meet again, God bless.